There's people to meet. There's new ideas to share. That is the hope of the symposium tonight and tomorrow, that we come together to talk about issues that oftentimes don't get a lot of discussion or don't have the opportunity to be discussed amongst a mixed group of individuals who care deeply about how people in our nation, in our world, in our communities are treated and respected.
When I started and was getting my feet wet, I listened to the stories of many, many, many rape victims. And it was painfully clear to me that in addition to them experiencing a profound and private violation, they faced insurmountable hurdles to reporting, being believed, and even healing from their experiences. It really wasn't till the early 90s, at the time in my life I was doing clinical social work, and I did a lot of work with sexual abuse victims, and at that point started working with adolescent sex offenders, that I really began to get why men and women had to work together if we were ever really going to end sexual violence in our lifetimes, or in mine.
This is a subtle form of victim blaming by calling rape a women's issue, because it shifts accountability off of the group who's doing it and puts it onto the group who's experiencing it. Whether the victims are women or men or gender non-binary people, the perpetrators are overwhelmingly people who identify as men. By definition, it's a men's issue.
And if you're wondering who the demand is, I want to tell you that it is mainly men. The vast majority of buyers are men. And I could extrapolate that more broadly to the men purchasing child pornography. For the people that are raping children, they are mostly men. And we might as well say that and own that.
I like to start, and I'm going to provide some solutions, hopefully, for the final part of my talk. I like to start from a positive narrative. I believe vast majority of boys and men in this world are good guys. We need to get that out, get that narrative out in the public domain, make men feel good about themselves, but talk about this bad stuff as well. I'll show you how I do that, back it back and so on.
Here's my first provocative question for you, Jones. When did masculinity become toxic?
I think what we're doing now in our culture is having conversations and critically examining hegemonic or dominant ideals of masculinity and masculinities in a way that was long overdue for thousands of years. So I think part of what we're doing, just like Me Too is not just speaking for the women who are speaking out around the Me Too movement, if you will, are not just speaking for themselves or even other women in the world today. They're speaking for billions of women over centuries and millennia who never had a voice.
So I'm glad this came up, toxic masculinity. And to me the question is, toxic for who? Right? Toxic for who? Exactly. And that's a question that I'm not sure always comes up. And I think it's an important question.
They hear the word toxic masculinity and they think that we're saying that being a man is toxic. And there's no subtle sort of understanding that it's a critique of certain kinds of dysfunctional behaviors that are associated with traditional notions of manhood, if you will.
90% of the men who are aware of the Me Too movement have changed nothing in their lives. And y'all know as well as I do, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So I say that for us and for our purposes of the conversation of men's leadership and accountability, to shift the conversation from empathy induction to compassion induction.
I was ambitious about, changing the world, and I thought gender is such an important angle to changing the world, and where are the men? I'm going to be one of those men.
You said that gender violence, sexual assault, domestic violence are not a women's issue, they're a men's issue. And I thought, doesn't that in some way minimize both the suffering of women at the other end of that, as well as the efforts that women have made through feminism over generations to combat it?
It's important when men do this work that we acknowledge that women's leadership, and on multiple levels, has been the formative and the foundational basis of our work. It's important that men acknowledge that women's leadership in a multicultural, multiracial sense, both here in the United States, but also all over the world, women's leadership has been the driving force behind all of this.
There's a wall that you hit up against when you're first starting at this field as a man, and you have to decide whether you're going to yield and submit to female leadership and take feedback in a healthy way, or whether you're going to step out.
We must find ways to make children, boys in particular, aware of the subtle and sometimes not so subtle reinforcement of gender roles.
And they picked on me all the time because of the way I dressed, because of the things I refused to do, because of my failure to be the type of boy they understood boys to be. And they jumped me. Are we asking the right questions? Is it that I'm being asked to be a more healthy man or produce a sort of healthier, or perform a healthier masculinity or manhood? Or should we be asking what might it mean to allow people to fail at those ideas altogether? Or another way to think, what would it mean to abolish, to get rid of, to remind people that it's okay to not fit into boxes that were never meant for your freedom?
A lot of people say, I love women, like Donald Trump will say, I love women. So how do you reconcile men who clearly on one level love women, but on another level are clearly misogynist? I'll just say this declaratively. If you're a man and you're committed to social justice and you're not feminist conscious and you're not pro-gender justice and it's not a central part of your ideology, then you're not a real progressive as far as I'm concerned.
I need to see this change because I hold power and privilege, and I need to make that change. So in the spheres that we occupy, how can we begin to create change by speaking out, stepping in, leaning into the discomfort, and hopefully making the change by being the voice when it'd be easier to step back and fall back. So I think that was one major takeaway that I think we all really felt was something that we're grappling with, struggling with, and are going to take with this and hopefully move past that discomfort into a place of action.
We can hold individuals accountable for their behavior, and we can take a step back and ask, how are institutional practices and cultural belief systems producing predictable outcomes? To explain and to understand is not to excuse bad behavior. It's to understand it so we can do better, so we don't have to reproduce it generation after generation.
So I think it's important when we're doing this work to realize that whether we know it or not, we are confronting trauma when we're doing this work.
A man came up to me and saying, Martin, you're welcome here with all your glory and all your shadows. And I start crying. I start crying for 3 meetings, I think. I still cry.
That it gets really lonely and painful in that discomfort. And so rather than retreating from that, I think as Russ shared earlier today, right, understanding that instinct, but also remembering to stay in community. The part of the fact that we're at a symposium today and last evening is a big deal.
Now, while we still have a long way to go, we owe those folks who bravely came forward in the early years, and I'm talking even in the 50s, 60s, 70s, but the early years, as well as those who believe them, our respect and our gratitude. And I just don't ever want to forget that because of all the people I talk to that experience sexual assault.
Hopefully we each walk away with maybe having a unique challenge or perspective that we didn't have before we came here tonight. That would be a goal, that would be a hope